Hello, and welcome to the first video of organizational behavior. So I am not sure exactly how many people are in the class just yet. I got the list yesterday. I'll check it again. I think it's about maybe 15 or 20, something like that, a pretty good number. And most of you are students that I have had class with before, so most of you know me. But for anybody who doesn't know me or hasn't had class with me before, let me kind of start right at the beginning and give a little introduction of who I am and then what we're going to do in today's class. So this is organizational behavior. We are going to start this first video with a procedural introduction. What's the procedure? How are we going to do this class online? What's it going to be like? Then we'll do a substantive introduction of what are the topics that we're going to cover this semester together. And then we'll start our first topic, which will be the introduction to OB. So very briefly, who am I first? Well, my name is David Warner. You can call me David. You do not have to call me Sir or Professor or Mr. Warner. Please do not call me Mr. David. That's not a very American way to address someone. We would never say Mr. and a first name. You always say Mr. and a last name. So I'd be Mr. Warner. Now, if you feel more comfortable calling me Mr. Warner, Professor Warner, Captain Warner, that's fine. General Warner would be okay too. King Warner is okay. King David is fine. Super David, I think would be okay. And maybe what you take away from that little exchange right there is that I am a little bit silly and I like to be, and sometimes I definitely can go overboard. And that's one of the things I should say right at the beginning is if I ever say anything that makes anybody feel like I wasn't respectful or I was making a joke that annoyed you or made you angry. I remember last semester I made some joke. I was teaching HR class and I was talking about whether someone was an employee or not. And I was saying, that imagine they came and fixed my toilet. And I just kept making that joke about them fixing my toilet. And somebody didn't think it was funny. It upset them. And that's okay. Come and tell me. I want to know. I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to learn a lot. And I want everybody to have a fairly comfortable, good time. So I'm from New York. That's where I am right now. This is an apartment. I can't say it's my apartment. It's my mother's apartment. My apartment is in Shanghai, but this is an apartment in Manhattan. And don't believe everything you hear in the news about Manhattan. It's not that bad, although I do not go outside. So it's just this apartment and me and you guys and my friends on the phone and all my friends on Netflix and the Tiger King and coffee. Coffee is my friend. So I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place here already, but fine. So my background, in university, I studied East Asian studies, focusing on China. And then I also studied music and economics. After school, I did a bunch of jobs, and then I went to law school. I'm a licensed lawyer, licensed in New York State, and I practiced law here in New York City. I practiced for a bunch of different places, focusing on contract law. I practiced in Chinatown, so for a lot of Chinese clients, and then I practiced in Wall Street for a big firm, and I didn't like that at all. Then I moved to China, and I've lived in China for 13 years. And the whole time I've been in China, I've been a university teacher. I would say professor, but in Chinese, I am 讲师,不是教授. 讲师. 讲师 means zombie, and 讲师 means lecturer. So, got to be careful with that one. So I've been a senior lecturer. I was a senior lecturer for 5 years at the Sino-British College, which is a British university consortium of many schools. And there I taught law and sociology. Now I've been at Donghua full-time for about 3 years, and I've been teaching law, sociology, and management. And I've also started teaching HR. So that's it. This is what I would consider sociology, except this is a very specific kind of sociology. The only other thing to know about me is that my hobby, or I can't call it a second career, but my hobby is working with theater. So when I say working with, I mean I've been a director of television shows in China. I've worked with movie companies. I've had my own theater company for over 10 years. I teach in Chinese usually. So I have a fair amount of knowledge about the entertainment industry in China. So I give a lot of examples that might have to do with the entertainment industry because that's really what I know best. And that's about it for me. Now let's talk a little about this class. Now this is a new class for all of us. You know, we really need to understand that teaching online isn't the same thing as just teaching face-to-face but put on the computer. You know, not everything just translates technologically from face-to-face to Zoom. We really need, especially because this is sociology class, this is how organizations function in groups of people. And technology, we're going to see some actual case studies where increased technology has actually led to terrible results because the workers were not trained in not only how to use that technology, like you could learn in a day or two how to use Blackboard or Zoom or WeChat or YouTube or any of these technologies that we use, but that doesn't mean you've been trained in how it feels, how it's different sociologically, and we need to understand that word, how it's different sociologically, how it's different anthropologically, how it's different psychologically, how it's different in social psychology to use something like this, where you watch me on video. You know, for example, there's such a different feeling when you're in a classroom and I can watch you. Right now, I bet a lot of you guys watching this don't have paper or a pen or some way to take notes. Especially if you're watching this on a computer, you can't take notes because you're watching this. Now, maybe some of you have split the screen, so in one half you're watching this video and the other half you could take notes. If we were face to face, I would have fixed that by now. I would have walked around the classroom and made sure I would not let you in my class, as some of my students know, if you don't have paper and a pen. I'll make you get it or come back and, you know, go out and find it and come back because you can't just sit and listen to me. You won't pass the class. You know, and part of that is also the psychological impact of, this goes to something called broken window syndrome. So broken window syndrome says that what other people see around them will determine how they treat their environment. So if you're walking down the street and, you know, you're walking down the street in Shanghai and you're eating something, you know, you bought some food, you bought a snack, you're eating it, you're drinking a drink, and you walk down a street and you see broken windows everywhere. Just this street just has a lot of broken windows. Well, because of that, you might also see more garbage on the street. Because of that, you might see people, maybe less in China, but spray painting their name on the walls. You might see people behaving worse on that street. And you, of course, might be tempted to just throw your garbage on the street because you already see garbage on the street. Now, let's say you're eating your food, you're drinking, you turn the corner and you see a street that's totally beautiful. Everything's clean. The street is clean. There's no garbage. All the windows are fixed. Even somebody who's smoking a cigarette might be less psychologically likely to throw their cigarette on the ground and litter on a street where everything's clean. And that's the broken window syndrome. It says that how we view our environment will determine how we treat our environment. Well, if you're in class and everybody in class is just playing with their cell phones and, you know, kind of doodling, or somebody's asleep on their desk, you are much less likely to really focus on the class. It's not, I mean, some students are outside of this. Some students are NACH high achievers, which we will talk about when we talk about motivation. Some students are just naturally motivated. Most aren't. You know, one out of 1,000 people is an NACH high achiever. But most people are very influenced by their environment, by the people they're around, by how people behave. Well, guess what? When you're sitting in a classroom full of people who are being forced to study, you study too. And now, because you're at home, there is the psychological tendency to sort of have the TV on in the background, to be checking Instagram or Reddit or WeChat or whatever it is you check while you're kind of listening to me. That stuff actually really matters because it has a long-term effect. Like, it might not matter that much right now while you watch this video, but you'll find out in 2 months or 3 months when we're taking the midterm and you're like, oh my God, wait a minute, did we learn this stuff? And it's like, yeah, we learned all of this stuff. And now you're going to be behind and you're going to have a problem because you can't catch up because you already developed an unhealthy habit. And now it's going to be very hard to break. It takes approximately 21 days to build a habit, and it takes longer than that to break a bad habit. So 21 days, we're talking about 3 weeks. That's not very long. So if for this month, we've already had, the course has been going on this semester for already about 6 weeks. If you had developed some bad habits of not really paying attention, not really taking notes, that's going to be a real challenge for you going forwards with online education. You can break those habits. We'll talk something about that in this class because we're talking about the behavior of people in organizations. So this is an online class, except we also will have live tutorials. So the way I do this is typically this is a 17-week face-to-face 3-credit class. And that means every week I meet you guys. This is typically, usually, every week I would meet you guys for 2.5 hours. I would give you a 10-minute break. I would give you homework to do every week, which is usually readings. There would be no quizzes. We would have a midterm coursework that is a group assignment and a final that is a personal essay assignment, short answer essays. That's the way we typically run. Now, instead of being 17 weeks, really it's usually 16 weeks plus the final, now we have it 12 weeks. And remember that last week, which is around July 3rd, that's your final exam. So week 12 is the final exam, which means week 11 is review for the final exam, which means I have 10 weeks instead of 16. That's a very big difference because I can't teach you that much less. I can't just cut out things. There are a couple of things I might be able to shorten, but I really can't cut out very much because this is a 3-credit class. And if you want these 3 credits, we need to stick to the syllabus. We have a textbook, which we'll talk about today, and we got to go through that textbook. There are some things I don't cover because they're covered in other courses. For example, the textbook has a whole chapter on human resource management. Well, I don't really teach that in this course because your university has a whole other class called HRM. Keep that open. So you have another class called HRM. You'll learn HRM in that class. But mostly we need to get through everything. And what that means for you guys is I'm going to have probably 3 of these video lectures per week for about an hour each, or I might have 2 of them for an hour and a half. I'll see how it works out. But about 3 hours of video lectures and 1 live tutorial that usually, for my law class at least, is usually about an hour and a half. For law class, you guys are lucky. For law class, I've been having 3 hours minimum of video lectures and 2 tutorials per week of an hour and a half each. But that's because law class, we have 8 weeks. Although really it's 10, but we have 8 weeks rather than you and I have 12 weeks. So to teach this class, for me to do it, I need 4 things: Blackboard, YouTube, Zoom, and WeChat. Right now, we don't have a software package that can do all of these. So for Blackboard, why do we need this? Well, for Blackboard, I am putting up your homework, your quizzes, and yes, you will have quizzes in this class, your assignments, the content, the PPTs, the links to these YouTube videos, any discussions or questions we have. Blackboard is kind of our home base for getting all the information from this class and for submitting your homework or quizzes. YouTube is the website I'll use to put these videos on, since that's the best for streaming videos. Zoom is what we're going to use for our tutorials, and WeChat is what we're going to use just for communication. When you have a quick question, when you want to ask me something, when I want to tell you where the room is located, if we're changing the time of anything, we need to have a way to have instant messaging, and so we'll use WeChat for that. We'll have, like I said, probably 3 hours of lecture videos per week. You watch those whenever you want. And the tutorial, one of the first things I want to do is to email everybody, and I'll do that today now that the school told me that they have finally created the Blackboard course, or else I would have emailed you earlier. I will keep messing with my beard because it's too long. It's uncomfortable a little bit, and I could shave, but I kind of like it. But I do mess with it sometimes. And then we'll figure out the best tutorial time for us, something that fits with your other classes, since I can't get a good read on what the schedule is for all the teachers. Some teachers are not being very forthcoming about when their tutorials are, but we need to find a time that works for pretty much everybody. However, I will always record the tutorials and upload them to YouTube. So if you cannot attend, and attendance is honestly not mandatory. You don't have to attend the tutorials. You will not get a grade this semester for attendance. The tutorials are helpful to show your face, to be there, to ask questions in person, but you can always watch the videos. So I will give you homework each week. The homework really will just be one quiz each week because I have to know if you are reading the material. I have to know if you're understanding what we're talking about. Or else, because, if we're face to face, I can just ask questions. You can raise your hand and I can call on you and you can give me the answer. I'll know if you guys get it. But with online, I don't have that luxury, and therefore we need to use homework for that reason. Coursework, I said, will be a group assignment. We'll talk more about that in a second. And your final exam will be cumulative, and we'll talk about that in a second. All communication and notifications will be first on WeChat and then on Blackboard. So this is an online course. Mostly we're going to discuss the textbook. And I will give you some related readings, some additional readings that I've taken from Harvard Business Review or from different journals that we will talk about. We'll talk about them in our tutorials and we'll talk about them a little in class. I'm not giving you a grade on reading that stuff. It'll help you, but I'm not going to test you on it. It won't be on the final. It won't be on the coursework. It's just additional information for you to really flesh out your understanding. And I'm not choosing things just to waste your time or my time. This is a busy semester for all of us. I get that. Because this is so new, it's hard. When you're going to school, you know what time your classes are. You don't show up, you'll fail. And so you have to go, and it just kind of gets itself done. School kind of does itself. Here, you're online, and this is what I mean by training the students. You might be waiting until Thursday and Friday or trying to watch all the videos on the weekends so that you can have days free to do whatever you do, but that doesn't work. But most students are not getting up in the morning, early and taking a shower and coming to class and sitting in front of the computer. That is not really happening for a lot of students, and it's really changing the dynamics. So watch the videos, come to the tutorials, or watch the tutorial videos and do the readings. That's going to be this class. The Blackboard, I said, what are we going to do on Blackboard? Let's go through that quickly. A lot of stuff you need is going to be in the content section. So I'm going to have all your links to these videos, to the tutorial videos. I will update that page every week. I will give you a free copy of the textbook on PDF. So it's a copy that I found online, and we will use that copy. So it is the correct textbook, so at least that's good. And you can download it from the content section. I'm going to put all the PPTs in the content section, any readings in the content section, and discussion questions. The discussion questions, we will talk about them in the tutorial. You don't need to review them. You don't need to prepare them. If you're doing the readings, I would keep those discussion questions handy. I would take a look at them because it will tell you the kind of things I want you to be thinking about or knowing or discussing. And that's what we'll do in the tutorials. The discussion section of Blackboard, here's where we're going to have weekly topic-based discussions. You can post questions. Now, if you write me questions on WeChat, if they're small questions, like, hey, David, for the coursework, how many pages should it be? Okay, I might just answer you. But if you ask me questions like, hey, David, I don't understand NACH high achievers in motivation, I'm going to tell you, please write that question in the discussion section of Blackboard so I can type an answer so everybody can see it so we can discuss it in the tutorial. I do not want to be answering questions 17 times for each student. So I will usually ask you, if you're going to ask a question, do it in the discussion area. The homework section is pretty important because we're not going to have weekly homework. Oh, no, not this. The quiz section is important. So I will give weekly quizzes. I do it for two reasons. One, it helps me know, are you learning the subject? And two, this is the stuff that will be on the midterm and the final. So the stuff I'm asking you on the quiz, it's not just asking you to waste your time. You're going to get a grade to learn what you need to know on the midterm and final. So it's kind of a gift grade because you need to know this stuff anyway. You might as well get a grade to show me you're learning it. For Zoom, this is our room code. I'll tell you if it changes, but right now that's my personal room code. YouTube is for these videos and WeChat is for basic communications. So this is what I mean about taking notes. If you didn't, because I'm going to move fast. Look, if I can make this 2.5 hours, I will. Trust me, I don't want to spend more time making videos than I have to, but because I have other classes too. This is not my only class. But as I move fast through these things, if you're not taking notes, it's going to be hard. Lectures, one subject per week. I'll say that. There will be one subject per week, 2 or 3 videos. Oh, this is wrong. This is not 90 minutes. This class usually meets for 2.5 hours. So 180 minutes, right? No, that's wrong. 140 minutes? That sounds right. And I'll take that into account. I do recommend taking notes. Textbook. Okay, the textbook is Robbins and Judge. Those are the 2 authors, and it's OB. That's the name of the textbook. So I have it in a PDF. It'll be in the content section. Download it from there. Homework, I said, is just going to be reading, and again, I'll put that into the content section. I do expect you to review before our classes, but generally that's something I would think about more for in-person classes. Grading, I'm going to give you a grade on the quizzes, coursework, and final exam. That's it. So if you fail the coursework, you don't do it, or your group is not careful or something, you'll probably fail my class, right? So the students who fail every year are the ones who just don't do the coursework, and they think, oh, I'll just study hard for the final. They won't, and then they'll fail. So the quizzes, you can pass without the quizzes. It's not a great idea, but you could. But you'll never pass without the coursework, not in my experience. The coursework. Let's talk about what that is for a second. This is a group project, and I'm going to stick with that for this semester. You know why? Because no matter what happens with this coronavirus, this is going to change the way people do business forever. And even before this, people were doing a lot of online teams, something like Microsoft Teams, are getting really big to be able to work in teams around the world online. I want us to continue with that kind of learning. So it's likely that after you graduate, you're going to be working in teams, particularly online teams. And that's useful because it teaches us about conflict. It teaches us about diversity, creativity. Also, this whole class is about the sociological behavior of individuals in work groups. And therefore, it's obviously relevant for us to be in work groups. I'll talk to you more about what the coursework will be and what will the topic be later. Final exam, that'll be in week 12. It will be cumulative. It'll cover everything we learned in this class, and it'll be short answer questions. Okay, here's my email, WeChat. My China phone won't work right now because I'm in America. If you want to talk, you can feel free to use my US phone, but it'll probably cost you money unless you're in the US, so you might as well just use WeChat. But I am available if you're feeling stressed out, if you really want to talk. I've talked about this a little more in some of my other classes. You guys have been students for a few years already. But for the students who just came into university, I do spend a little time talking about what do I mean when you have problems? And that just is the idea that people really do get stressed out, especially now with social isolation. People can really get angry, anxious, upset, stressed out, nervous. They can worry. People can get depressed. All of that stuff is serious. Now, I am not a licensed therapist. I'm not a coach. I'm not a life coach. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a teacher, but I have been a teacher for more than a decade, and I have worked with a lot of students who do get depressed or worried or anxious. And so I just want to put myself out there that if you do need someone to talk to, please don't hesitate. Feel free to contact me at any time just to say, David, I'm really struggling. My classes are too hard. My parents are pushing me. I don't know what to do. I can't handle my time. We will talk about time management a little, probably in our next video or next week. But just I'm struggling here and I don't know what to do. I'm totally comfortable. I'm not going to tell you, take this medicine or here's what you must do. Or, just it's somebody, if you want to talk, feel free. Class rules. So obviously we have different rules because this is an online class. It's not like you must bring a pen and paper or you can't come late. It's really about how you talk and write. And the idea here is to show respect to others no matter what they say. If you're really upset, talk to me, but there's no need to start fights. If you're having any problems or you're stressed out, as I just said, talk to me, talk to Mei Ling, talk to someone, because a problem shared is a problem halved. And practice time management, as we just said. This is a very new way to learn. And it is challenging to learn this way. There's, as you guys know, you have a lot of classes, videos to watch. It's hard to manage your time. And I know the teachers feel that way as well. Okay, that's the procedure of how we're going to do this class. Now the substance. What are we going to learn in this class for these 10 weeks? Well, today in this video and next video, we're going to talk about the introduction. Next week, we'll talk about what is group behavior? What does that mean? How is that different than individual behavior? And I'll tell you, it's so different. It's unbelievable. But how people act in groups is really different than how they act alone. And that should be clear if you think about your own behavior when you get in a group of people, that depending on who's in that group, your behavior does change. Then we'll talk about the difference between a group and a team, because they're different things. Then we'll get into diversity, and diversity doesn't just mean that your skin color is different, or you're from different countries, or you have different ethnicities, or you're from different minorities. Or diversity is a lot more than that. Even in a Chinese class with 100% Chinese students, they can be very diverse, just not ethnically diverse. We'll get into communication. How do people communicate with each other? What is an attitude? What does that mean? And how is that related to job satisfaction? What are emotions? And how is that different from moods? What are personalities? And the difference between that and values and perceptions. Because if you want to be, this is kind of the second level of management. In the first level, when you learn management, you really learn how to understand yourself, how to plan, organize, lead, and control a group of people in terms of kind of telling them what to do and making sure that you have benchmarks, making sure that you're able to analyze what is your break even, what is your load chart or your Gantt chart or your PERT diagram, or how do you organize the work, how do you delegate everybody to do the work, how do you make sure you're meeting your benchmarks and having the best practices. But none of that really has to do with understanding the psychology of the people who work for you, or how they behave alone and how that's different from how they behave in groups, or understanding their personality or their emotions, or none of that is really in management class. Management is planning in order to achieve the organization's goals, organizing people, being a leader, and then monitoring people and adjusting your plans compared to benchmarks. Now we're talking a second level of management, which is really understanding people's personalities and psychology. Then we'll get pretty deep into motivation, both concepts and applications. Then we'll get into structure of an organization, culture of an organization, changing an organization. Then if we have time at the end, I might cut these two, but if we have time at the end, we'll get into power and conflict. So let's talk about today's first class, which is what is OB, an introduction to OB. Now, as you might see, I speak pretty fast. I try to speak clearly, but I do speak fast. And I move through these PPTs pretty fast, which means sometimes you do need, and you can download the PPT, but you do need to be able to go back and look at these PPTs. I don't want to say you should listen to these videos more than once. I don't think you should have to, but if you're not paying attention, yeah. If you're trying to play a video game or use WeChat while you're watching, yeah, you'll probably have to watch these more than once, or else there's a pretty good chance you'll fail, honestly, because this is a lot of information presented in a short time. And I'll tell you what's important, and then some things I'll just move through. So like this is not important, it's just talking about it. Why are interpersonal skills important? Your ability to communicate with people, why is that important? Well, when some place is a good place to work, and usually that's because people are happy there. Happy doesn't mean that everybody's not nice or people can't communicate, but you make good money. That's not happy, right? You could say I'm satisfied with my salary, but nobody would say oh, I'm really happy to work there. Now, happy has to do with having good communication skills, good interpersonal skills, and those places do tend to have better financial performance. You have lower turnover of high quality employees. You have better recruitment if you have good interpersonal skills. There's a very strong relationship between quality of relationships at work and job satisfaction, stress, turnover, social responsibility. All of these things go with interpersonal skills. There was a study done in 2007 of over 200,000 respondents or people, and what they found is the number one factor that influences happiness at work is a relationship between supervisors and coworkers and you. That's it. That is job satisfaction in a nutshell. It's not about how much money you make. It's not about the company car. It's not about is your office in Puxi or Pudong. It's not about any of those things, and it never was, and it never ever will be. It's all about social relationships. Now you take what people are going through right now, where they're at home and they're on their computers and tell me how important it is to introduce people to a method of working that can protect social relationships. Because I guarantee you, only the absolute best companies, the Facebook and Apple and Google and maybe Alibaba, though I strongly doubt it, only the best companies in the world are really giving their workers training in how to use online education while still maintaining positive social relationships. Because having a bunch of Zoom meetings where everybody's trying to talk and trying to moderate and everybody's talking on top of each other, it's incredibly ineffective for social relationships. And this is a big thing that will be studied. I guarantee you, as an academic, I can tell you in the next 10 years, there's going to be an ungodly amount of papers about, academic papers in journals about how this Zoom culture is affecting interpersonal relationships, how it's affecting marriages, how it's affecting intimate relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, how it's affecting family relationships, how it's affecting business relationships. This is going to be a big topic in the future and a very interesting one. Because the world is going towards this. As we go through this and we build up our technological capability to have meetings and family relationships and put everything on the internet, you increase that with VR, with ML, machine learning, and with AI, right? You put VR, ML, AI into this internet online communications platform, you're really getting the future of interactions. And if we don't deal with this now and figure out how do you keep a healthy social relationship, it's really going to lead to problems, especially in work. And that's what we're studying now. Because this is not management class, right? I just said management is the art of getting things done through other people. It is an art, much more than it is a science, but it's about getting the organizational goals achieved. OB is not. OB is not about achieving the organizational goals. OB is not about planning what needs to come next. What's our mission statement and our vision, and what from there is our strategy, and what from there are our action plans, and who's going to do this, and let's make a PERT diagram and a load chart and a Gantt chart and a break-even analysis, and let's figure out which team is going to do what, and let's make a business model. And OB is not about any of that. OB is about behavior. How are people acting and why? I don't care if they're getting a lot of work done because I want to have a business. Now, for me, as I said before, I mostly deal in the entertainment industry. So I've had a theater group for 10 years that was quite successful. And some of my actors have gone on to become extremely famous in China. Well, my goal was never, I want to sell as many tickets to this show and I don't care what happens next week. No, of course not. My goal was, I want us to be talented and good in 6 years. I want us to be good now, but I'm looking farther down the line. And therefore, even if we sold 1 million tickets and we had so much money this show, are people happy? Are they satisfied? Are they enjoying themselves? How's their loyalty? How's their commitment? What are their negative workplace behaviors? Are they bullying each other? How are they speaking to each other? Are they coming in a positive attitude? When they leave, are they leaving together or alone? How are they eating? Are they eating healthy? Are they gaining weight? What's going on with their behaviors as they get together in these groups? Because that's going to tell me a whole lot more than how much money did we make this quarter. And businesses that don't understand this are destined to really fall apart in the long term because their workers won't be happy. So let's do a quick review of management because this is like second level management. We do need to understand. So we understand what is a manager, right? That's someone who gets things done through other people in organizations. These 3 facets, right? 1, they get things done. They achieve organization goals. 2, they achieve it through other people. And 3, they do this in an organization. So what is an organization? Well, it is consciously coordinated. Ooh, that's a bad line. It is consciously coordinated, which means it has a deliberate structure. If you remember the vocabulary, it has a deliberate structure. It's composed of people, and it has a common set of goals. Ooh, these aren't straight lines. It has a common set of goals, right? So you have 1, it has a deliberate structure. 2, it's made of people. And 3, it has a set of goals. And you should know these things from management. This is just a review. So we need to remember Fail, Henri Fail, and he talked about functions. He said all managers have 4 functions. Planning is the first function that managers need to do. This is involved in figuring out what is the organization's goal, and then how do you have a mission or a vision for the goal? How do you then create these big goals that are really wide and broad? How do you then create strategies to achieve that? How do you then create action plans to achieve the strategies, to achieve the goal, to achieve the mission statement? That's planning. Organizing is really what we're talking about more in this class, which is about figuring out who is going to do which job and what are their timelines and how are they going to report to each other? What is the chain of command? Leading, which used to be called commanding and coordinating, is about getting people motivated, getting people to want to do the job, figuring out what drives people to move forwards, what drives people to be involved in a change in an organization, having charisma or being a visionary leader. And then controlling, which I've said is not telling people what to do, but creating benchmarks and standards, then judging your performance and then figuring out what's that difference. Why is your performance not up to the benchmark of best practices? Is it because your standard was too difficult? You know, if the standard of online courses, let's say the best online courses have a teacher with 3 hours of videos and in 10 weeks the students all get an A, and I want that to be my standard. And so I give you all of these videos and textbooks and readings, and well, maybe my standard is crazy. You know, I think that to learn this class, you should have 6 hours of videos and a tutorial every day, and you should read 2 textbooks. And, you know, maybe the problem is not the students. Maybe the problem is David's standard is crazy. David needs to change his standard so that the performance matches the standard. Or it could be that I need to motivate the people better to match the standard. It could be that people don't know how to do the job and I need to educate them how to use Blackboard in order to achieve the standard. But it's about figuring out a standard and then judging what is your current actual performance and how do we get that up to the standard. That's called controlling. We also had Mintzberg. So Henri Fail was in the late 1800s. Mintzberg was in the 1960s. And he said managers also have 3 roles they need to play. And the 3 roles they play, he said there are 10, but they're in 3 categories. I did this because it's a circle of 10 different roles, but they're in 3 categories. There is the decisional category, where managers have to decide. They have to be the person who decides, for example, what are we going to do this month? What product are we going to make? How much are we going to sell it for? Who's going to get to use the company car? Who gets to go on that trip? Who's coming to our client meeting? Who gets to use these resources, the money, the rooms, the budget, the equipment? Who gets to use it? That's the decisional role. Then there's the interpersonal role, where the manager is the person who has to talk to people. They have to stand between employees that are maybe quarreling. They have to represent the company to the suppliers, customers, shareholders, stakeholders. The manager also has to stand between sometimes the CEO and the rest of the the world. So the manager has this interpersonal relating to people role. And then the third one is informational, that the manager needs to be the one who understands what's going on in the marketplace, who collects all the information on our competitors, on prices, on the internet, what's going on, and then also decides who is going to get this information. There are some things that the employees need to know, but they don't need to know everything. So the manager also decides what to disseminate. Right? So we have these 3 roles, the interpersonal role, and then you do not have to know these, but you should know the general 3 roles, right? Interpersonal, informational, and decisional. And you could read this PPT on your own. Then we had Katz, and Katz said in addition to Fail's 4 functions and Mintzberg's 3 roles, we also have 3 skills. And what are the 3 skills that people have? Well, they're technical, human, and conceptual. And what Katz said is you need different amounts of skill based on what level of manager you are. So if you're a low-level manager, let's say you are the manager of a local car garage, a mechanic car garage that fixes Toyotas. Well, you need to have a lot of technical skill, right? Even though you're the manager, you need to know how to fix the tire, or you need to open up the hood and be able to look inside and say, oh, this is a problem with the oil or the engine or the carburetor or the gas cap, or I don't know that much about cars. You need to technically understand it. Do you, if you're the manager of a small garage that fixes Toyota cars, do you need to understand how international taxes in the EU affect the debt-to-asset ratio of your company? No, of course not. Do you need to know how different treaties that the United States has signed with the UN affect pollution and environmental standards for Toyotas going forward in the next 20 years? No, of course not. You don't need that because that's high-level managers. Now, a manager who needs to understand international treaties and tax rates and yield curves and all of these conceptual things, do they need to know how to fix an engine or fix a tire? No. They don't need technical skill, because as you go up as a manager, your technical skill gets smaller and smaller, but your conceptual skill gets larger and larger. Your human skill, however, always stays the same. It doesn't matter what level of a manager you are, you need an equivalent amount of human skill. Now here's a question. Do managers who move up the quickest in an organization, who get promotions, do they do the same activities with the same emphasis as the managers who do the best job? So you comparing the managers who move up the quickest versus the managers who do the best job. Do they focus on the same things? Now, when we studied management, we talked about those three scientists, right? Henri Fayol, Mintzberg, and Katz. And I need you to know those three and remember them, because that should just be a basic introduction. But we didn't talk about this before. The managers who do the best job. What makes a good manager? I don't know if you've ever had a good manager, if you guys have really worked before. I've had some bad managers and I've had some good managers. Strike that. I've had some terrible managers and I've had some good managers. Eling is one of the best managers I've had. She's a good manager. All of the teachers believe that she's on our side, that she's trying to work for us and protect us and defend us. She cares about the students. She's humble. She keeps her desk in the same room with interns. She doesn't have to do that. I mean, she gave that office in the corner to John. She could have had that big office for herself, and she didn't. So she's a really good manager. She really has the students and the teachers' interest at heart, and she's competent, which is very important. She knows what she's doing. She's smart. She's well educated. She has a PhD, I think, but she's a good manager. Now, my manager, when I worked at a Chinese TV station, that manager, he called himself Double G, because his name was Gugong, and so GG. So he called himself, you can't say GG in Chinese because that's a bad word, which I won't tell you what it means, but if you already know, GG is a bad word, so nobody called him that. So Double G. And he would sometimes, I remember there were times he would come to work at 4 p.m. Everybody else was there at 8 and worked all day. He would show up at 4 and he would call a meeting. So everybody's in the middle of trying to do their work. He calls a meeting, we all go in, and he says, okay, everybody, I just got here and I didn't bother checking my email. So everybody tell me, what emails did you send me today? And tell me about them. And we were like, dude, are you crazy? Just go in your office and check your email. You want me to not only send you the email at 9 this morning, then you don't even bother reading it, which is obnoxious. And then you come in at 4, which is also obnoxious. And then you tell me to tell you the email? That's even more obnoxious. And this dude got raises. He got promotions. So why? He moved up. He moved up from when he was a kid. He was like a TV host. When I came in, he was a top-level manager at SMG, Shanghai Media Group, which is one of the biggest media companies in the country, China. He was honestly one of the worst managers I've ever had. He did some crazy things. One of the craziest things I ever saw is there was one time that my team won a contest. We were on the creative development team, and I helped them develop this reality TV show for Chinese TV. Which was all about the Silk Road. It doesn't matter. We won a big contest. We were supposed to win for our team 60,000 RMB plus a trip for us to go to England to work with the BBC. Well, the next day, our boss comes in with a brand new gold Rolex and says, hey, everybody, look at my new watch. and then told us that we were not going to England. He chose 2 girls to go to England. They were these 2 very attractive, very young girls who were not on our team at all, had nothing to do with the project, didn't know what it was about. They went to England, they spent 6 weeks there, they came back, they did a lot of shopping, and we asked them what did they do with the BBC, and they said, oh, we never met the BBC. And I mean, this is one of the reasons SMG lost millions of dollars. They went bankrupt. And he didn't care. He got a promotion after that. So while I am just spreading rumors, and it's not really rumors, this is all true, but while I am just venting on video to a bunch of students, and I shouldn't do that, but I do not apologize. This guy kept getting promotions. Why? He was the worst manager I've ever seen in my life. You know, and this question was studied by the scientist named Fred Luthans. Fred Luthans analyzed 450 managers and his team, and they found that, okay, all managers have 4 basic, what we call activities. Sometimes managers spend their time doing traditional management, planning, organizing, leading, controlling, and being interpersonal, decisional, informational. Sometimes managers spend time communicating with people, just like talking to workers, talking to their supply chain, talking to the CEO. Sometimes managers spend time doing HRM, figuring out who to hire, conducting interviews, figuring out who to fire, who should get a promotion, who should get a bonus, who should be put on this project, you know, a lot of HR considerations. And managers also spend some time networking, going out to the bar after work, hanging out with the right people, going to the right parties, you know, giving gifts, things like that. Well, you know, take a guess which kind of managers were the best managers and which kind of managers were the most successful in getting promotions. The best managers, what do you think they spent their time doing? Well, part of it was traditional management, and a huge part of it was communication. What about the managers that got the quickest promotions? I can't circle this one enough because that's all it is, nothing else. Nothing else really mattered except this. That's what Luthans found out, that the average manager spent their time somewhat equally. You know, about 32%, a little, you know, around a third of their time was on HRM, right, traditional management. And then about 30% was spent on communication. Those are, you know, what's typical. That's a little more than half their time. The smallest was networking. I mean, about a fifth of their time, but not very much. An effective manager, a really good manager, like I think Ealing is a very good manager, would spend almost all their time, almost 50% of their time communicating. That's really where it's at. And then for traditional management, they should be at this higher level, they should be good delegators. If Ealing is spending a third of her time doing just traditional management, why? She's a high-level manager. She should be able to delegate that, and Ealing does. Ealing does delegate it to Mei Ling, to Christina, to Marina, now to Daniel. I mean, she delegates, she does, and that's effective. And then about 20%, 26% of their time on HR, right? So a lot of their time on HR dealing with the employees, and 44% talking to the employees. What about a successful manager? Half of their time networking. Almost no time on real management. Almost no time on HR. These two are really where you care about the employees. You know, or sorry, these two are where you care about the employees. 28%, you know, fair amount on communication, but almost all of their time networking. That's how you get ahead, but it's not how you be a good manager. So managers who are successful, this is speed of promotion. We're talking about networking. You know, and human resource was the least important. Managers who are effective in terms of quality, communication, and HR were the two most important. So what is OB? What are we doing in this class? So OB, and you don't need to write this, I'll tell you what I want. But first of all, we need to understand this is study. What I mean is in OB, we don't take a guess. We are trying to use science, and we are trying to use investigative techniques, case studies, different surveys and analysis and analytical tools. We're trying to make this study. We're trying to study 3 levels: individuals, groups, and organizations, which we call structure. So we want 3 levels here. Why? What's our goal? Our goal is not like a manager. A manager cares about achieving the organization's goals. That's management. What we care about here is this word, effectiveness. Okay, we learned about this in management, the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Managers have to deal a lot with efficiency. How do you get the most output for the least input? How do you make sure you're not wasting? Right? We talked about this in management with budgets and PERT diagrams and flowcharts and all of these things. So we don't want to waste people's time. We don't want to waste our resources. We don't want to waste money. That's efficiency. Now we're talking about effectiveness, achieving the goals. So if I want to be effective, let's say I have this theater company and we're selling all of these tickets and we're making all of this money, but I see on that ticket sales team I have, that girl and that guy, they hate each other. They do not like working together. Well, that's not effective. It might be efficient because I don't have anything else for those two to do. So even though they hate each other, I don't care. I put them on the team. So, okay, that's efficient. I'm not wasting my resources. But it's not effective, because long term, that's not going to achieve my goals. So we're trying to understand here human behavior. And that's not the easiest thing to understand. First, we need to understand psychology. How do people behave when they're alone? Individuals and animals. How do they behave when they're alone? Then, how do they behave when they're in groups? How is it different how you talk or act or dress or, speak or behave or your physical gestures? How is that different if you're in a room versus alone versus, watching TV versus you're in a room full of millionaires, or you're in a room full of Victoria's Secret models, or you're in a room full of your family, or you're in a room full of your wife's family, your husband's family? I mean, all of these people who are around us change our behavior. And then in terms of structure, if you're in an organization, how does that change even more? Because now, people dress differently, they sit differently, walk differently, talk differently. They might even eat differently. If you're alone in your apartment, you might, open up a can of beans and just eat it. If you're in a group of millionaires, you might not do that. You might cook the beans and put some nice decorations on it. And if you're in an organization, you might eat a salad because that's what they have. And you don't want your boss to think you're getting fat. I mean, just people's behavior changes. So this shows us something called the iceberg, the organizational iceberg. And what that means is what you usually see about an organization is just this. What you see about an iceberg, a floating iceberg, what you see is just the tippy top. Most of the iceberg is underwater. The really huge part of the iceberg is all under the water. You never see it. You just see the absolute tip of the iceberg. And that's what you see in an organization. If you go for an interview, you go to do business with a company and you see, oh, look, everybody's desk is very organized. And, oh, I see a lot of people are driving nice cars. Or all the men are wearing a suit and a tie. Or this place is very clean. Or this office is dirty and everybody's desk is dirty. Or these workers look unhappy. Or these workers are not well dressed. Or, wow, look at their computers. Their computers are really old. Or, wow, I don't see any customers here. Nobody seems to be on the phone. It doesn't look like anybody's busy. Or look at this, they have a lot of money. I mean, look at this office. It's rich. This is all the stuff this is the tippy top of the iceberg that you can actually see. What's below that iceberg really holding this company up? That is everything we talk about in this class. The attitudes of people who are there. How do people communicate with each other? How do teams work? What kind of personalities are there? What kind of conflict is there? What kind of behavior is there? What kind of skills are there? This is what is holding the iceberg up. And that iceberg above the water may look big, but actually if any of this understuff starts to melt, that iceberg will immediately drop below the water and the company will go bankrupt. And you see it all the time, and you're seeing it now with some of the global economic crisis that's going on right now. You have these big companies that look like multi-million-dollar companies. Well, guess what? You shut them down for a week, and they fire 50% of their workers. They don't pay anybody health care. Everybody hates them. People are suing them. They're begging the government, please give us money, please, when the average person doesn't have money to eat. But you have these millionaires. Because what you saw was just the tippy top of that iceberg. And as soon as anything in the bottom started to melt, all of a sudden, zoom, this was below water. So we need to understand that what we see about a company, that's not what's really going on in the company. What we study in this class, OB, that's a lot of what's going on, at least from the human side. This is not the financial side of what's going on in a company. This is the human side. So we understand that first we need to focus on the individual. That's the central feature of any company. Then the group, because group pressure has a huge influence on individuals, which we'll talk about. Then the structure, which means organization, because obviously that can really establish your relationship. That determines who you sit near, what floor of the company you're on. It determines, when you go to the lunchroom, who's there. It gives you order. It gives you a system. What time should you go home? What time should you get there? What time should you eat lunch? If everybody needs to get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that means everybody went through rush hour traffic or rush hour on the subway, that has a big influence on people's behavior. Now, if people can come in, anytime they want, around 10 or 11, and you can leave whenever you finish your work. Some people work so hard, they bring lunch and they eat their lunch at their desk while they're doing work, and they leave at 4. Other people, they take a nice, long, relaxed lunch, they leave at 6. That's going to very much influence people's behavior too. And then the environment, right? The broader external environment. That could be the financial, the economic environment, the global environment. It could be what's going on with the weather patterns. It could be sociological changes, the demographics of the workforce, that you have more diverse people in the workforce, more women, more minorities. It could be like now that you have more technology and people who are in the workforce working from home. You're going to have all these things that are going to influence behavior. So that's one thing, that we're studying individuals, groups, and organizations. Another thing I said is that we are using a study, a systematic study. And what that means is we're trying to use EBM. We're not just taking a guess. We're not just trying to use intuition. Do people, when should we have a meeting in our business? Should we have a meeting on Friday afternoon or Monday morning? Well, I think we should have it on Monday morning because everybody's fresh from the weekend. What's your evidence for that? What's your evidence to prove that Monday morning is a better time for a meeting or rather than Friday afternoon? It's just your opinion. That's called intuition. And we need to be pretty careful about intuition when we want to use as much as possible evidence. We also now use more and more big data. And we need to be a little careful of big data because there's a lot of promise in this idea for management. Big data just means numbers. Another way to say this would be quantitative, not qualitative. So we use quantitative data. Another way to say this would be analytics, right? We want to predict things. We want to understand risk and prevent catastrophes. And this can help us, but we need it for evidence. And the problem with big data is it doesn't always measure what we think it measures. So when we study HR, for example, in the HRM class, we talk a lot about how do you measure, because this is HRM's job, how do you measure customer satisfaction? How do you measure employee satisfaction? How do you measure productivity? How do you measure efficiency or effectiveness? It's easy to measure profits. It's relatively easy to measure loss. But how do you measure efficiency? That's a different idea, and that's where big data comes in, and it can help us. But big data still is too limited to really measure happiness. We try in OB to use big data or in HR to measure the happiness of the workers, but that's a very hard thing to do because we don't have universal definitions of what is happiness. It's different for different people. So let me ask you a question. What's the net present value at a discount rate of 12% per year of an investment made by spending $1 million this year on a portfolio of stocks with an initial dividend next year of $100,000 and an expected rate of dividend growth thereafter of 4% per year? Now, I would guess most of you can't answer this question. I don't think I can answer this question. A discount rate of 12% per year? I'm not sure what that means. I understand most of the words. Dividend growth of 4%. I mean, I kind of understand these words, but I couldn't answer the questions. And I wouldn't expect anybody to answer these questions by guessing. You need to go to school and study to answer these questions. And we all get that. We all understand you can't answer this question unless you've studied this. Well, what about this question? What's the best way to motivate people? Now, here's the problem with OB. People think they know how to answer this. People think that this is easy. I mean, that last question, that's hard. You got to go to school for that. But this question, okay, you give them money. You give them more vacation. You give them a nicer house, a bigger car. You give them better health care. You give them chocolate for lunch. You know, just do what Google does. Let people bring their dogs to work. Have babysitting at work. Let people choose their projects. I mean, this is just guessing. What's your evidence for any of that? Do you have any evidence to say people would work harder for money? Do you have, I mean, it sounds true. Do you have any evidence to say that if you give people, you know, good food at the cafeteria, they'll work harder? And do you know that that means they'll get better results? If you let people this is something they studied at Google. If you let people bring their pets to work, so Google they had a policy where you could bring your dog to work. If you let people bring your pet to work, they will be happier. They will be. They won't work harder. Why would they? What does bringing your dog to work have to do with working harder? If you give people chocolate, Google has, I think it's Google, maybe it's Facebook. They have like a chocolate Friday where every Friday they have like these special chocolate treats. It makes people happier. Studies have shown that that kind of stuff makes people happier. Doesn't make them work harder. Why would it? Why would giving somebody chocolate make them work harder? You know, so what do you even mean by motivate? It's like, that's the problem with OB, is people have this idea, this preconceived idea that, oh, I'm a human, I understand behavior, I'm just going to accept these things as facts. And what we're trying to do is replace that with science. That's really what we're trying to do. So that when I say, you know, giving people more money after $40,000 a year for a job that works 40 hours a week doesn't make people happier, or will motivate people, but only 3%. I mean, it's like, this is based on something. It's based on a study somewhere that was checked and was validated. And it's not necessarily true for every person. Nothing is true for everybody. But it tries to alleviate and replace some of these preconceived ideas we have with some systematic studies. You know, here are some books that are available if you want to study the average person's idea of sociology and management. You know, If Harry Potter ran General Electric, What the World's Most Crazy Mountains and Peaks Teach Us About Success. Killing Cockroaches, The Leadership Secrets of Santa Claus. Oh yeah, that's a real good book. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Leadership for White Men. How to Work Successfully with Black Colleagues. Oh, there's a great one. The Pirate Captain's Guide to Leadership. I mean, come on. It's like, look, some of these are good books. I'm sure there's a lot of very, very common sensey information in a lot of these. You know, you should practice time management. You should learn all of your employees' names. Look, the best book on any of this was Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book's from like the 1950s or something. That's really the book that all of these books are copying. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I used to demand, and this is years ago, that all of my students read that book during management class because it's such an important book. You know, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's really what they're talking about here. Fish. This book looks good. Okay, honestly, I'd like to read this. Maybe I should get that on Amazon. How a Fish Market in Seattle Made Its Jobs More Motivating. Whale Done. The whale trainers at SeaWorld wrote a book on managers. Okay. I'm sure it doesn't hurt to read these things, you know, and I'm not saying that I'm any management guru. I'm certainly not, you know, but I'm just presenting what's in the textbook. We're just following a very structured study of the science of organizational behavior, where a lot of these books are pretty common sensey. Okay, we're past 1 hour, so I'm going to stop this video before we get into this new idea, which is the 5 elements and the 3 core elements of what make up OB, because that's going to be the next part of today's class. Okay, so take a break, get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, and then I will see you in the next video.